Sometimes you have to look at the shadow to better appreciate the light. The darkness of the shadow can affect how we perceive light. Harsh light would not look so bright if the shadow was not dark enough. Weak light can look stronger if contrasted with deep shadow. There are some who use shadow as core part of their photography, such that it becomes their style. Others use it to draw attention, create mood, and add effects. But before we talk about how to use shadow in our own photography, let's look at its properties. This is the darkest part of the shadow because light is not hitting this part at all. This is umbra, which we can also call hard shadow. There's also soft shadow. The light is hitting this part but not completely. This is called penumbra. The umbra and penumbra form the shadow cast by the subject. There's also shadow on the subject, core shadow, reflected light, halftone, lit side, specular highlight. You don't need to remember these terms, just know that not all shadows are the same, and that there are a variety of ways to capture and use them. Let's look at some examples on how to use shadows. Some details in the shadow can be left hidden. We don't need to expose for the whole scene all the time. Always wanting to show all the details can actually hurt our photography. Not every photo needs to be HDR looking. Exposing for the highlights can create added mystery and interest. The elements in the light are exposed properly, while the shadow hide the other elements. Exposing for the shadows not only will make the shadow less prominent, but might also overexpose the highlights. Timing is also important. The midday sunlight creates harshest light and shadow. While it creates the strongest contrast, the downside of shooting in midday is that the sun is directly overhead, creating smaller shadows. The lower the sun, the longer the shadows. If you want to have softer light and longer shadows, shoot close to sunrise or sunset. Having longer shadows gives you more options to capture shadows on walls, roads, and other elements. On a related note, since the time of the day affects the light and shadow, it would be worthwhile to visit the same area at different times of the day to see how the light and shadow interact. Silhouettes also work well with shadows. Technically, they are not the same. A silhouette is a subject blocking the light. Shadows are cast by a subject blocking the light. Silhouettes are usually more defined as they are not distorted like the shadows. We can make silhouettes look like they are part of the shadows to create interesting effects. Shadow reveal textures, especially when the sun is at a lower angle. Elements cast shadows that draw out details and add depth and interest across the frame. We see the texture of the road, the wrinkles on a person's face, the grittiness of the streets, and more. The contrast created by the shadow bring out certain parts of the image and hide others, adding depth and abstraction. The contrast can also help to create mood. Hiding certain elements and letting the other elements grab attention add to the feeling of the photo. There's enough to capture the viewer's attention while leaving the hidden parts to their interpretation. Consider this photo. What's stronger in your opinion? Shadow can be used to direct attention. We can use it to frame a focal point. A focal point surrounded by shadow draws more attention. By partially covering parts of the subject with shadow, we are highlighting the uncovered parts. 3 takeaways. Number 1. We can use shadow to simplify our composition by hiding other details, add mystery or abstraction, define mood, and create strong subject and background separation. Number 2. You don't need to expose for the whole scene. It's okay if some elements are hidden in the shadow. Number 3. Look for good light and be mindful of the shadow too.